Take two.
Welcome to the While You Grow podcast with Dr. Courtney Addison and me, Addison Powell, where we will dive into all things pediatrics, occupational therapy, and other important topics around children and development. So, if you are a parent, occupational therapist, student, or just want to learn more about occupational therapy and pediatrics in general, then keep listening. For more information on the podcast and to follow us on social media, take a look in the show notes. Let's get started. All right, welcome to the While You Grow podcast. We have a special one today. It's the last one.
The last one for you.
Yes, last one for me. As you can see, already taking my name off the poster. It's gone. Ready for the next person to take over.
Has completed her capstone, and she is going on to different horizons.
Bigger things.
Just
bigger things. It's actually not really goodbye because she doesn't realize that she's going to be coming back to be a guest speaker.
Yes.
Probably. More often than not.
Let's talk about
would be surprised. But to put this in perspective, I'm actually presenting my capstone tomorrow. And that's why we're recording our last one as I'm presenting tomorrow.
So just reminder, this is our new co-host that will be joining.
Yes.
She received thousands of likes and listens on hers.
Yes.
So we thought it was a perfect fit into our next podcast.
Yep.
Dr. Boone, again, she's an expert in all things pediatrics. And perfect fit for this podcast, right?
Oh, yes. I'm excited. I'm excited to listen to y'all two talk about everything.
We gotta make sure it's like PG though. That's gonna be our family friendly.
You've been in the field for a while, so you have a lot to say.
A while? Is that
I have been in the field for a while.
A while.
Longer than me.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by that.
Yes. So what have you felt like you've accomplished, Addison, in this? How many episodes have we done now? And
this is episode 20.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh my God. 20?
Yes. That was another reason to finish it out.
That's an accomplishment.
Episode
that's
20.
A huge accomplishment.
Yeah. 14 are in my research for my capstone, but 20 in total were done.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That is a lot of time we've spent together.
Yes, we have spent a lot of time together. It's been great though.
Lots of hours editing and Instagramming and social media. But it's great. It's great. And I'm just glad you were able to do this. This was able to be a great start for this program. We have some students interested in continuing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really excited.
It's going to be hard to take your place, though. It's going to be hard for you to, for the next person to come in and be the next Addison Powell.
You probably said the same thing about Emily. And she's the one that started all this, so big shout out to her always.
Emily Waller. She's out there being a great mom and great OT, and she just don't forget about us, Emily. No, she's great. She's great. So you want to talk today about something you're passionate about.
Yeah,
I think that's a perfect thing for our episode today.
Yes. I don't know a lot about it because I haven't worked in the schools. However, something that's been near and dear to my heart for a while now, y'all know why, is IEPs and OT in the school system for kids, because I have a nephew who we've learned he was not getting what he really truly needed and deserved. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Boone and Travis and so many other people have put so much time and energy into helping my nephew as well as his parents to just show them, you have the power. And that's what I think a lot of parents don't realize, is how much power they actually have in those situations.
Mm-hmm. Rightfully so.
Yeah.
Dr. Boone, explain what is the IEP. I think this is whenever parents come up to this situation or, clients or this different things, they're so intimidated by it.
Right.
Because there's so many litigation, there's so much, different things. What is the IEP?
Well, the IEP is an Individualized Education Program. It is essentially a federal document where the team comes together, and we're considering the educational team. So we're looking at your principals and your assistant principals, general education teachers, special education teachers, any type of related service, which is what OT falls under, which would be occupational therapy, physical therapy, but also nursing services, transportation, what else? Oh, and we have speech therapy, it all falls under this umbrella of special education. And so when we're looking at an IEP, this is an individualized document for our children who qualify for special education services that really outlines the plan of care for them while they're in school receiving special ed. And it details it down to the precise minutes of the services that they need, the goals that they want to accomplish along the way, both long-term and short-term, and depending on what state you work in, it'll be a goal and an objective, and mile markers essentially to what they'd like them to accomplish. And the IEP is really set there so that the student can access their overall academics in a supportive environment that fits their needs. So when we're developing an IEP, it is a team approach. Our parents are on the team, our school administration is on the team, those related services are on the team. And working together as a team, we create a plan that this child could be successful to access their education.
Thank you.
Was that comprehensive enough?
I think that is.
I think so. I mean, it's a hefty document and a hefty process, and that's what I know my future brother-in-law has learned, and it's because you just don't know, and sometimes that education isn't given to parents of like what this is and what it's supposed to do, as well as their rights.
Right. I think along the way, you know, as a parent that has had a child that has had an active IEP for the, you know, a part of their school career, and as someone who's participated in plenty of IEPs.
How many IEPs do you feel like you've participated in?
I'm pushing well over, like, I mean, hundreds. I don't even know at this point. Looking at like what I had every year for every single time that I was in. But I also sat on the advocacy side as well. And that's been really important. So I've been a parent, I've been an advocate, and I have been a participant as a related service where we're still advocating for the child along the way. And I think what a lot of people don't know, and what a lot of parents don't know, is that the IEP is a living document, right? It is our initial plan, but it can be adapted and amended at any point in time if the data that we're receiving, I always go back to that data, right? If the data that we're receiving isn't meeting the needs, and we can amend those goals. And, you know, a lot of times we have to come back to those more formal meetings, and, you know, coming back into a meeting a lot is difficult, but sometimes those meetings are necessary so that we can keep on track with what our children need in the school system. And I think that's why IEPs are so important, because it holds our school professionals accountable, and it also holds you know, the whole team, and parents included, that we're all accountable and we're all on the same page working together for what's best for our student.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it may not always feel like that to the parent. Right. And I'm just speaking for my brother-in-law, is that he felt, I think, on my nephew's IEP team, it was probably 6, 7, 8 individuals, and he felt it was like 8v1.
Yeah.
Because they're all on the same page. They come prepared, and then it's just talking to him about, this is what we're doing. And this doesn't go for every school system and every team and every individual that's part of an IEP. Mm-hmm. But it more felt like telling them, this is what we're doing, not, we want your input, your collaboration.
Right, absolutely. And there are parts in the documents of the IEP that ask for that type of input. And I think creating a space that's safe for the caregiver and the child, because the child does attend IEP meetings after a certain age. Usually about 13 is when they're participating in these meetings. If they want to, they have that say. If they want to, if they don't. But creating that supportive environment for the parent, but also having and cultivating those relationships with the parent too. And I think that makes the difference all around, the relationship, not only as a provider you have with the child, but also with the caregiver, so that we're not feeling like it's going to be a battle when we're going in there. Because a lot of times, I know this plenty of times as being a parent as well, going into these meetings with your guard up, because you don't know what's going to come and what's going to happen, and really having to stand firmly in keeping all of the members of the team accountable for what the IEP is. And I've always thought of it as an approach, because it can be really overwhelming, because we're running in and probably coming from another school, and I'm running into a meeting, and I'm sitting down and taking my computer out, and I'm probably working on another document, and then there might be other members of the team in there, and then the parent comes in, and knowing when do I need to stop and then start engaging so that we create that welcoming environment too, but also providing the data along the way. Beyond the IEP, we are also required to report our progress on a quarterly basis for the most part. So every 9 weeks when report cards go out, we have a progress report card based on those goals. Mm-hmm. So if you are reporting the progress and being real transparent with the data that you're seeing, nothing is surprising when we come back to those yearly meetings.
Right.
And we're really, communicating well that way. And I have always found, too, as being, I could talk a lot, apparently, like a related service provider, is if I'm starting to see a difficult area, or if something is concerning that has come up to, present with in the sessions, I'll talk to other people. So I might reach out to the school psychologist, and I'll probably reach out to the caregiver to say, hey, I'm seeing this. Are you seeing it at home? Do you think you could try this? But I feel like that's a part of my role as an occupational therapist, because for the most part, OT in the school system is once a week for 30 minutes. And is that really going to make a change?
Yeah.
So what do we have to do to close the gap in the other areas? And just to kind of talk about this process from where it starts. So, knowing this from, again, being a parent with Mason, this process starts at 2 years old. This IEP process has the potential to start at 2, where they meet with the team, which includes speech therapy, OT, nursing was there, a school psychologist, the whole, kind of leader, director of special needs, his early interventions was there, his own speech therapist was there. So this process does start early. Mm-hmm. So it's important, I think, for parents to kind of really invest in this process, learn all that you can about it, and then for those OT students that are out there, or those OTs, again, just being comfortable with collecting data, starting that process, and kind of, it does start early, and it doesn't finish in the school system till 21, or it can go till 21, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So the other words that get kind of thrown around too is, what's the difference between, or your best kind of description, an IEP and a 504? Oh. So how does that look different? And you kind of alluded to this, like with those quarterly meetings, a lot can change in a kid's life. Different circumstances, different, custody even in certain situations. But is that able to be reflected between the IEP and the 504?
Sure.
Speak to that.
So the IEP is specifically related to special education services, and that is really important, where 504 offers a child accommodations so that they can achieve their academic success through the use of accommodations. Now, in an IEP, the part of the plan would be different types of accommodations would be within that, but also possibly any type of modification of the curriculum would be in there as well. But when we're looking at those IEP services, we're really looking at the services that are needed so the child can access their best special education services. Okay, and I think that's where we see that difference between the IEP and the 504. So the 504 could be a student that has a medical diagnosis that is impacting their ability to access their environment, but those needs can be easily resolved with accommodations. And when we're looking at accommodations, it's just simple things that could be incorporated into the general education classroom, such as extended time on tests and assignments. It is
preferential seating.
It could be small group testing or small group reading. It could be chunking. So these are accommodations that the teacher can easily utilize inside of the general education classroom so that the student can be successful. Whereas in an IEP, we would probably see those accommodations, but the child requires a little bit more specialized service to access their education. So in the case of special education, our students would receive resource services where they would meet more on a one-on-one basis or in a small group with the resource teacher in specific academic areas that are impacted by the testing that comes from the result of the school psychologist, what they're reporting, right? So you might have an academic limitation in reading or in writing or in math skills, and this special education teacher, the resource teacher, would come and work with that child, whether it was an inclusion-based or in a separate room where they would get more individualized service, so they could work on those skills, while the teacher is also implementing the accommodations that are set forth so that the child can be successful. What we want to remember is that with accommodations, we don't want to over-accommodate.
Right.
And that's, I think, a really big deal. Like, too many accommodations could go real backwards for our kiddo, too. So we want to be able, it all goes back to data, look at the accommodations, what is going to work best, and what does the data say that works best, so that we're choosing the right accommodations, because over accommodation is a thing, and it could really make things sticky.
Right.
When the child's accessing. Like, so if we write an accommodation where they have to use a pencil grip, for instance, right, when they're doing writing because we want to promote a good tripod grasp, but the child is like, no, that makes me look different, I'm not using it. But if it's in the IEP, then we have to document on that. So we want to make sure that we're not doing accommodations or writing accommodations that wouldn't be successful for the child inside of the classroom.
That's really important.
Is that helpful with the 5
Oh, yeah.
I think that is good.
Definitely.
Something else, from your experience that you talked about, talk about I think a lot of parents don't know that there's advocates out there. What is an advocate? And you can kind of talk about your experience and how do you access them, and maybe talking about like pricing and some of those things.
Yeah, you read my mind. That was my next thing I wanted to, because I didn't even know, and I think a lot of people don't know, I didn't know you could get an advocate for this kind of thing. You showed up and you did your best.
Why would you need an advocate? Why would a parent need an advocate?
When maybe they just need a little help understanding what's going on, and in a bigger part of it, realizing that things are being done that they're not supposed to be being done. And I need someone who knows the law, who knows the IEP well, like through and through. And we've had some great ones, including Dr. Boone. And you've talked about, you have acted kind of as an advocate in this situation, but also in other situations. Can you talk about a little more in depth about an advocate and the importance of a parent knowing when they need one?
Absolutely. So I think before we even start an advocacy, we need to know about IDEA.
Yes.
Right? Because we're all talking about laws, and that's when we're really pulling in advocates, right? So it all starts with IDEA, and understanding what is required through special education and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and understanding those concepts first. And a lot of parents and caregivers don't know about IDEA or Section 504 to even access. So we kind of look at that process there and educating of what special education actually looks like and what is the child's educational rights, which stems from IDEA, and being able to give all students with disabilities or documented disabilities their right to education. And that's where it really, stems from. It was updated in 2004. I think a lot of particularly older individuals, so we'll look at Gen X and above, right? So have a real skewed version of what special education looks like, instead of this idea that we're supporting the child and the needs that they have within the school setting that allows them to receive these services. And I think that's really important, where as providers, as occupational therapists, we're showing what IDEA is, and we're showing what Section 504 is, and we're saying this is what special education is, and this is the benefits of accepting special education services, right? So your advocate comes in to assist the caregiver or parent on knowing their rights in these formal meetings with a federal living document, right? We always have to go back, that IEP is a federal living document. And I think advocates come in to make sure, again, that the team is being held accountable and transparent to the caregiver and or parent. And the child is receiving all the services that they need for them to be to reach their educational success as they go along. So in some cases, as being an advocate not only for my own child, but also for your nephew, what I really saw was just reviewing the IEP and the documentation process and having questions and reaching out to see how those questions could be answered. That's where the advocate comes in, because we understand special education and IDEA and the laws that go around that, and being able to ask the questions to get further detail on what is actually occurring to provide clarity and transparency. And the advocate, like I said earlier, is really there to hold the team accountable for the data that's being presented, so that we are supporting our student. And that's what it always comes back to. I think advocates offer an additional voice. So for parents or caregivers who, one, don't know special education, they could provide that information on the particular topics, even without going into meetings. Right, because that's an advocate occurs outside of meetings too. And suggesting questions that could be asked and how to promote transparency within the educational team. And then advocates can also be within meetings as well, just to act as also a buffer to, again, fill in the gaps and look for transparency during these more formal services. And I think, particularly I look at my own household when we were doing it, and I came in as an advocate, but I also brought in another special education provider who would also speak for me if she needed to. And that was really successful when we were also looking for services. And I know that we've spoke about your kiddo and acting along those ways, and I've worked a lot with Addison and her family too, not in person, but being there. And then when you're not seeing that communication, where do we need to go from there? And I think that's where we lucked out of having such a connection to accessing advocates that are outside of this educational environment, right? And so that's kind of, I think we had.
Yes, we were very, very blessed, because I think in total 4, 5 people have been working on this to just provide education to the family and show Dad what he can do and what he has rights to. And I know he has been extremely thankful for it. He just, like most people, just thought they're doing the best for my child. And while maybe they are trying, you can also go back to, there's limited providers in schools and they're stretched very thin. And it's not, we're not trying to put the blame on the school system or anyone that's on the IEP team. It's just, sometimes this is how it happens. But, and you also talk about pricing with advocates. We lucked out. Most of the ones that have been helping us were for free. I had connections, and that was the other thing. I don't think anything would have ever been done if I didn't have my background. Because red flags were going off in my head, like, no, they cannot do this, because he is so smart and he just needs the proper support, and he will be a successful student and a successful individual in the community. And I know that. So that's when I was like, can I run this by all the people I know that have been in this? And that's when things just started happening. But I know there are also advocates that they can get pricey. But I think in the end, if you're able to afford it, it's really important because you want the best for your child.
There are plenty of free advocacy programs out there too, and that is a part of what you would find on your state education department. They offer those, and through procedural safeguards as well, showing you the rights that you have as a parent, and all of those are accessible, one at the state level, but two every time that you walk into a meeting as well, to show different programs that you can access to support your child, whether it's family connections or other types of advocacy groups that are available that are at no cost. So there are options for our parents and caregivers.
Right. And I think for any OT students out there looking for like maybe something different or even capstone ideas, this is a great field to kind of become familiar with. You know, whether you're an outpatient OT or inpatient, just, you know, being familiar with this language, being familiar with what is being said, what the student needs is really vital for any pediatric OT, I think. Because, you know, they all go to school. So knowing that part of their occupation is important as well. I think the other thing I kind of want to talk about too is OTs, you know, out there, like they're on this team too.
Yeah.
So is that somewhat a conflict of interest, you know, when we're having a difficult conversation or, you know, parents are kind of having those guards up? What can we do as OTs within this team to really, you know, bring that connection together?
It's a loaded question.
That is a loaded question.
I think it starts out with developing a relationship.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think organically as occupational therapists, we strive in mental health and developing relationships. We see people for people.
Right.
And we always go there. And I think that is really an important component. And I think it's really important for the people that we're working with to also see us as human beings. You know, like you see me as a human being and I see you as a human being, we're going to have a much better relationship after that.
Yeah, because I mean, you've done research on your caseload versus workload, and how many students did you have on a caseload at one time?
Up to 103.
And so when you think about
103 different relationships, and I have
and 103
IEPs.
IEPs, like that's a lot. And I can't imagine. I haven't worked in the school system. I would, after going through all this, I do have a little bit more of a passion to maybe go into the school system, just because I want to be one who really does, like, I do my job and I advocate for the child because I want the best for all kids. That's my passion.
Right. You know, another topic that's come up and in Mason's kind of interview and kind of what we've been talking about is educationally appropriate. Does it support their education? With Mason's situation, he's advanced in so many different areas. He's hyperverbal. So when he had his review, the speech therapist, you know, she was just kind of explaining, like, all right, there's certain, yes, he still has autism. Yes, he still has this, but he doesn't meet my criteria yet.
Yeah.
You know, because it's not anything that supports his education. Kind of explain what that means. Because I think as an OT, we're like, well, this is their occupation. Everything supports it. How do we put this? How do we do this? But how, you know, kind of explain that it's educationally relevant and kind of balancing that line.
Yeah. So with occupational therapy, we have this super broad spectrum of what is our profession, right? We are mental health professionals. We are medical professionals working in rehabilitation, at like physical rehabilitation and neuro rehabilitation. We are also educational providers at the same time. So when we're saying educationally relevant, it is really all of the support that we give as occupational therapists always has to come back, essentially to cycle back to academics and the child's ability to access their academic environment. Okay? So, very broad, very not specific. You could have some kiddos that have some sensory needs, but if those sensory needs are not impacting their ability to participate in the classroom, they would more than likely not qualify for the OT service. Because OT, well, and also we should also preface that occupational therapy is not standalone. You cannot receive OT services or physical therapy, services inside of a school system without special education. You have to have that. You have to qualify for special education services first, and then occupational therapy and physical therapy are the related service, but that we're not standalone. So we always have to know that too. So we are supporting, when we come in as occupational therapists, the child's ability to access their academic environment through special education. Okay?
Right.
So everything has to tie back to what does that look like. And in some cases, yes, the academic environment can be walking through a lunch line and holding a tray and putting food on. We're sequencing and reaching and putting food on. Completely appropriate, because that's the academic environment, and the child has to be able to participate in that occupation so they can engage in lunch with their peers. Okay? But if there's not a need in that area for them to do that, that's not a goal that we would address, as opposed into the medical setting where the doors are open,
right,
and we can literally look at anything on the spectrum of occupational therapy and address it. But we're kind of in this little box that is not always my favorite box to be in. And you have to ask yourself, is it educationally relevant for me to provide services? Or if I do that, am I taking away from the child receiving their best education? Because the way that OT looks like in schools is we're doing pull-out direct services, so that means you're missing material. And am I impacting that as well? So we always have to consider what is educationally relevant for the child for them to access their environment when they do receive OT services.
Yeah.
Right.
And that would be where inclusion is the key. But that's a whole nother topic.
Yes. I know this one could go on forever, but I think
we hit the highlights, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
Relevancy, academic, educational relevancy, 504, IEP, advocacy, mental health. That's a lot, but there's so many more things to talk about. I think that is a good thing, and there's constantly just learning about different things. And unfortunately or fortunately, or however politically you look like, I think it could potentially change in a couple years. What that looks like. So it is important as OTs for us to be advocates for this. And just the other thing to know too is that you do have these rights whether you go to a public or private school, and there are opportunities for at-home school too, right? So it's not just your public school that has to follow this, and there's different things. So that's another tidbit I wanted to add.
Yeah, and this whole podcast, I wanted to be a resource for parents, but this especially since it's been more personal now, like just letting parents know they're not alone out there, and that wanting to give them the resources and the education to show them, like, this is what I can do. And maybe knowing it's okay to ask for help and when to ask for help.
And I think a key point, too, and as a parent, you always want to be like, I want everything. But sometimes that's not appropriate. Right? And in the situation with Mason, he didn't quite qualify for the 3K program. But putting him into the 3K classroom that is provided for them, I don't know would be the best, because they're at completely different levels. So figuring things out that, as a parent, yes, you do want everything for your kid. You want to, and I have a tendency, all right, let's do it all, but sometimes that can actually be, like you said, Dr. Boone, I'm going to call you Christine, though.
Yeah,
is that okay? It's too much, and it can be detrimental. So don't, as a parent too, just from my personal advice, not that less is more in this situation, but just what is right. What's the right fit?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But yes, thank y'all. You've been such a big help this entire experience. It's been amazing. It's been a good ride, but I've enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun. Never thought, again, I've said this so many times, and never thought I'd be doing a podcast in a million years.
Yes.
But I've enjoyed it.
I haven't enjoyed it too. I think this is a great resource for this community. And as someone said, and I think it was Travis, if we just reach, I don't know, what's his name?
Oh gosh. Was it Dutch?
Dutch.
Yes.
Dutch. If we can just reach one person, one family,
Right.
I think it's doing its job.
And we've reached, I'm trying to remember, on, I think, Instagram, it was like 35,000
Wow.
views in total, like account views. And then on...
Probably 1,000 of those came from me. Checking how many
maybe.
followers we had.
maybe. And then I want to say the podcast in total from like the different platforms we're on, it was about 17,000.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So it's been a big reach.
In a 14-week time span.
Yes.
So let's put that
And honestly, less than that, because the first one didn't come out until like week 4.
Oh, that's right.
That's right.
That's right.
But it kept going until quite literally the very last day that it could.
The last day.
The very last day.
Congratulations, Addison.
Thank you.
You're going to be a great OT.
I'm ready.
Yes. We'll have to get you on after you take your boards to talk about everything boards.
I think
gosh.
that is a great idea.
Isn't that a great idea?
Love it.
Yes.
I'll do it. I'll be around for a little bit.
For a little bit?
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Love you, Addison.
Love y'all. All right. Well, we close out the very last one with me.
Yay.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the While You Go podcast. If you learned something on this episode, please like, share, and comment. Join us next time as we dive into all things pediatrics, occupational therapy, and other important topics around children and development.